So just so everyone knows, I head up talent for US for Loadsmart. We are a logistics tech company automizing all things trucks. It doesn't sound sexy and exciting, but think Uber for trucking. Again, not making it sound sexy, but it's fun. And it's an industry that's going through a lot of disruption, especially after COVID. So it's a great place to be. And I haven't used one of these before. And I haven't seen people in a long time. There's a lot we're going to get through. Just so everyone's aware, I started at Loadsmart in 2019. Since then, we were a Series A, and we're now at Series D. We got our $200 million funding this year. So what's amazing is I've seen them go through hypergrowth year upon year. So there's a lot that we've learned as a team. So a lot of what we'll be able to give you is some feedback that we've had, data to give you a good idea of what we've done for candidate experience. Doesn't work for everyone. Don't forget, we went from startup to hypergrowth to now trying to become compliant, which is not a lot of fun, but it's something we're going through, and it's making us better. So what we did back in at the end of 2020 was reach out to our candidates, people that had already started with Loadsmart, and ask for their feedback, right? This was done through SurveyMonkey. We didn't have anything plush to send out, but we had those conversations. We sent out emails. And a lot of what we were seeing that was coming back, the words of our candidates were, on the interviewer side, was interviewers weren't always on the same page. So it meant that people that were in the interview team, the hiring manager, there was a disconnect somewhere. Preparation. I'm sure all of you have felt this, right? Some people in interviews don't always check your resume or don't check your LinkedIn. That was happening a lot. People were asking questions around their backgrounds, and suddenly it's a case of they hadn't read their resume. And here's the crazy thing. Through that, what we realized was there were a lot of repetitive questions, right? Because people were, again, going back to the resume and starting to ask questions during the interview and not really understanding what was going on with the candidate they had in front of them. Which, the word disrespectful, I think, was a word that was used with 3 different candidates. The other thing was that interviewers were distracted on calls. Now, think about 2020. We were going into COVID, but we were using video calls all the time still, right? It was crazy when we went into COVID. Interviewers were getting distracted by Slack, GChat, a number of different things. And candidates can see that when your eyes are not on them. So that was a bit of a disaster. We had a lot of complaints about that, especially with more of our junior interviewers. Now, on the talent acquisition partner side, which, just so you know, going forward, I call them TAPs, so I don't have to have a mouthful of words. There was a lack of communication. And I think we can all say, if we've been in an interview process, if you're not being communicated to, it's very frustrating. A lot of the times, the candidates are actually unclear of what we do and the position, which is crazy, right? You'd think your recruiters know what we do as a company. You'd think they know what the job is. But sometimes all they're doing is reading off of the job description. And it can sound monotone, and when questions are asked, they just go back to the job description. Also, the other thing is, and this goes back to lack of communication, candidates were unsure of the process and who they were speaking to next, right? So sometimes we found that email communication didn't necessarily say who the person was at the company. Maybe first names were used and not last names. So that really threw them off as well. And it's really funny, statistically, 53% of people actually abandon the recruitment process because of poor communication, and then 32% because the recruiting process took too long. All of this and not enough communication moving people through the pipeline is frustrating for anyone. So, first things first, you create a process. You have to create a process that's going to allow you to work across your hiring accuracy, so you're hiring the right people, it's fast enough, but also understanding what your candidate needs. So what we did as a team, and this was something that our CEO absolutely loved. All the companies you see there, so Amazon, Google, Microsoft, those large companies all the way down to hyper-growth companies like MediaMath, Choco, even Netflix. We spoke to recruiters in their departments. We spoke to candidates that had been through their interview processes. We read up articles on what they do and what they do best. We then took all of that research and put it together and had a huge brainstorming session. Where are we now? Where are we going? What can we use now? How are we going to tailor this as we grow so it adapts to us? Now, what was really amazing about this was, if we look at our growth, we were able to see clearly with some of these companies what they'd done and how they'd done it. And then when you think of the benchmark, where do you want to be? How good do you want to be with your process? Well, you kind of want to be at Google when they're in, I guess, 2019, when they were doing an amazing job. And now learning from Google again, keeping in touch with them, what they're doing now. Again, they're starting to benchmark some of the things that we're learning still. So they have a lot of money thrown at this, so do Microsoft. So how can we take that information as well? So all of this being said, taking this info, we created our own process. And what I want to go over next is just one part of our process. So one part of our process is the internal section, which is preparation and alignment. I can definitely tell you I had a lot of pushback from hiring managers because of this, because it does take time, right? You have to build that foundation. If you go straight in, that's when mistakes are made. But if you have the foundation, it'll actually set you up for success. So one of the first things we did was create a master document. Now, we didn't have a lot of money. We had Lever as our ATS, quite basic back then. Anyone that has, I guess, Workday or like an ATS where you can put in the job description, the success profile, you guys are very lucky. We had to create a document, and the master document is nothing fancy. It's essentially having everything on one document. So the master document contains the job description, right? No, everyone's aligned. We know what the job description is. You have the success profile, right? What is it that we're looking for in this candidate? The competencies, the skills. Have 4 of those so we can create that scorecard. We also have the hiring formula. What is the hiring formula? Essentially, who's going to be in the process and why? Right? You could have Tom from accounting be in an engineering process, but why? So again, thinking about why you have people in the process. And then thirdly, the actual process and the questions that are going to be asked during the process, right? That should hopefully stop the repetitive questions. If we think about Google and we think about Microsoft, they have a drop-down box of the type of questions you should be asking, whether it's behavioral, situational, or to check what kind of experience you've had in regards to tech. So that was the first thing, right? Next step is you have the intake call with a hiring manager. Here's the thing. Before 2020, when I joined, we were order takers. That's the only way to describe what we were doing. The hiring manager says, okay, this is what I want to hire. Okay, great, hiring manager, we'll go find that. 2020, we saw a huge shift. We have to become consultants. If we want our company to hire the best people, if we want to give them the best candidate experience and look great, we have to be partners. So one of the biggest things that we did was, in this intake call, we essentially advise our hiring managers. We turn up with a calibration of the type of candidates they might be looking for. We also find market data. Okay, right now, if you're hiring in Chicago, this is how many roles are currently open. You're looking for candidates with all these things and all these attributes. We may have to look at this, right? So going to them with data and information. The other thing we do during the intake call is essentially button up that master document. Okay, if you say this to the whole team, are they going to understand? How are you going to communicate this? Also, make sure there's nothing in there that is in any way sexist, racist, because we are a global team, so we do have people in LATAM, and sometimes they'll use words and you're like, you can't use that in the US, we could get sued, so let's be careful. So again, going through everything there. Once you've done that, and that can take up to an hour, which I can tell you now, hiring managers at first hated it. By the end of it, they were praising how well we were doing with this. And then the sync with the interview team. Again, going over what every person is going to be assessing, why they're in the interview process, the role, why the role is open, the org structure, the challenges, right? Not holding anything back, giving them all the information. So again, they're all on the same page. And so with this, we've never had a long time to hire, right? We've always done really well. But what we found was, and if we look at just this year, our time to hire in the US was 18 days. For our high volume junior roles, it was 8 days. Time to hire is how long a candidate is in the actual interview process. So for us, that's been brilliant. I think once we get a lot more compliant, it might change. But generally, I believe the average in the US is 32 days for time to hire and 58 days time to fill. Our time to fill is sort of tottering on 32 days to 36 days right now. But generally, if we think about it, a lot of candidates think that you should be able to go through a process within 2 weeks, right? So that's their conception. And they're not wrong. Up until that sort of director level, you should be able to get a candidate through the process in 2 weeks if you can, if you have a good setup. Next, I hope you guys like the gifts. This is one of my faves. So training and coaching, this was a huge part, and my CEO was absolutely amazing at actually making it mandatory. Not even, hey guys, you should go to this training. It was anyone that doesn't turn up got a Slack message from our CEO asking why they weren't at my training, which was amazing. But what we did was train our interviewers firstly on interview etiquette, but also how to ask questions, right? We take it for granted. We're in a job where we constantly ask people questions, we're constantly interviewing, but not all interviewers do that, right? So one of the key things is getting them to understand what a behavioral question is. What is a situational question? What is an opinion question, right? Opinion questions can lead to biases. So when do you use those opinion questions, right? Being able to guide them through what a good interview looks like, and how you dig deeper. So if you're only asking one question at every interview, you want to compare apples to apples. And the only way you're going to do that is by digging deeper. You ask the one question, then you ask follow-up questions, teaching them to think like that. Now that, hand in hand, went with role-playing. I feel like the role-playing went really well. And this is where it was in small groups, and I got all of my taps to go in and do this. And I actually made them hold people in the interviews, in the role-playing, accountable. So, hey, Jerry from accounting, you're not saying anything. What did you think of this role-play? Hey, Emma, you've been very quiet there. What do you think, right? Or Jason, we're going to get you to be the candidate, right? Really pulling people in, getting them out of their comfort zone. So that was something that we did, and it really did work. And we actually got praised for it afterwards, even from the people we picked on. The other thing is just the etiquette. Small things like, if your camera's not working, tell the candidate. The worst thing is being on a Zoom call and seeing a blank screen, right? And candidates get dressed up for their interviews. So again, that's not a great experience if they can't see you. Obviously not checking your Slack. Turn everything off. This is time you spend with the candidate. Also, this might sound really weird. We went into COVID. We all had to work from our bedrooms. That was great. But some of the junior hiring, we had peer interviews, and we actually had to tell our junior interviewers, can you please tidy your bed up? Or like, do you mind just ironing your shirt a little bit, or looking a bit presentable, or at least don't look like you just rolled out of bed, right? It sounds really silly, but some people that have never interviewed before, they needed that advice. They need to be told what to do. Another thing that we did, which was awesome, and it went down really well, was pitching the company. We got into role plays, and we had hiring managers, interviewers pitch the company, that 30-second elevator pitch of being able to talk about what we do, and then being able to tell them what they like doing at the company, or what they love about their jobs. Again, that goes to the candidate experience. It explains culture to them too. So again, guiding them, giving them some advice. And then obviously, internal training. Now, this is huge. I role play with my team all the time. So much so I think sometimes they get really annoyed with me because I'm like, all right, let's role play. And they're just like, again. But it works, right? Constantly training them. This is what the process looks like. How are you going to answer a hiring manager when they say this? When they want a purple unicorn with green spots and golden hair, how are you going to push back and say, we can find you a unicorn, but the rest, it's not going to happen? Really being able to educate them to be consultants. I've got some wonderful stats there. So 99% of hiring managers who get interview training say they truly needed it. Our survey, we had 82% of our leaders and interviewers send messages to say, thank you so much, we needed this. And then 20% of hiring managers ask illegal questions. Sometimes they don't even know, right? In the US, 2019, there was a law that was put in, you cannot ask someone what they make. Cannot ask. The amount of hiring managers I had that were like, oh, well, how much are you making? Big no-no, right? In the US, there's a $250K fine if you're reported. So that's a big one for us. And then always bringing it back, it's a candidate-driven market. Even if it's not, it's always a candidate-driven market. When you want those top candidates, they're not just going to sign up and go anywhere, right? So candidates are interviewing you just as you're interviewing them. And just it's common sense, but you have to tell them that. So the candidate journey, that white glove service, right? So if we really think about what we've done here, the interview and process prep, we do go in, we do have conversations with candidates, we let them know what the hiring managers are going to be discussing with them. We're very transparent. All right, hiring managers are going to go over, they're going to want to know about this, this, this. The process is this, this, this. And actually staying in touch with them throughout the process and talking to them about it. For the junior candidates, we normally just have a sheet that has a breakdown and gives them some tools and information they can come to the interview. And actually, that's really worked for us for the junior sales candidates. It's been amazing because if you give them stuff they have to read and they haven't read it, the hiring manager is going to say, hey, well, what did you think of our blah, blah, blah product? If they don't have an answer, you know they haven't read it, so you know that they're not invested. And actually, hiring managers will question that as well. Did you read the literature that was sent to you? What was exciting about it? And then marketing materials. I know that Todd touched on this, collaborating with your teams, right? We don't have to create beautiful marketing materials. Actually, guess what? Your company probably already has them, and they're probably sitting somewhere in the sales org. So what we did was we essentially took what our sales leaders had. We sat down with them and were like, hey, what do you have? Sat down with marketing, what do you have? And we essentially took a lot of their materials and created our own using that. So things like, obviously, who we are, what we do, just a quick breakdown. Videos, right? Not everyone loves to read. Some people just prefer to be visual learners, or they're just better visual learners. So again, that was another thing we were able to do. And then feedback during the process. So here's a big thing. A lot of people think it's cheating when you tell a candidate, well, the hiring manager said you weren't communicating well, or you weren't straight to the point. That's actually good feedback. Okay, for you to be successful in the next interview, I would actually home in and get straight to the point, right? If you're giving them guidance to do better and it's not going to give them any answers, do it. Rejection, feedback, and call. So what we do as a company is we offer feedback to all of our candidates. Normally there's an email sent out. If you're director level and above, you get on the phone. You get on the phone, you have a conversation. I know that a lot of our Gen Zs don't always pick up the phone, they don't always check emails, but that's why we say, hey, if you want feedback, send us an email, and we'll set up some time. Normally Fridays, my whole team has Friday mornings blocked off for rejections. So we make sure we put time into that. Now, questions I normally get asked is, how honest can you be in your rejection feedback? Well, if you've been talking to a candidate throughout the interview process, and if you can gauge whether they're going to take the feedback well, you can give them a bit more, right? And you can come in as a recruiter and say, hey, let me step out of Loadsmart. I think you did all these things well, but let me give you some advice. Your resume should be tailored like this. These are some of the things you could do to improve in your next interview, which for senior leadership, it goes down really well. But it's, again, once you're close to the candidate, you're able to have those conversations. If you're not, make it generic. That's how I say it, but still being able to give feedback and talking to a candidate, it gives them closure, right? It's just like when you break up with someone. If you don't have closure, it's always that, oh my God, I still love you, what's going on? And then the offer, this for us was great. This was a global effort. Actually, it was a team in LATAM that created this. It's an offer letter. Right? So it's actually celebrating the candidate. Hey, we're going to offer you this. In LATAM, they actually present this and give the offer. So you have their name, their title. You also have feedback from the hiring managers and the hiring team. So positive feedback that should hopefully get them excited. Like, who doesn't want to hear how wonderful they were in an interview? So that's another thing that's really worked for us. And actually, I had a director candidate that said, wow, you guys are just, this is beautiful. You took the time to do this to make me feel special. And so our offer letter has a breakdown of the org. It has a breakdown of the actual offer, how much money they'll be making, as well as their stock options. And it explains stock options. Not everyone knows what stock options mean, especially when you're pre-IPO. So it's a good way of giving them enough information to get them, to make them feel comfortable. Candidate feedback today. So one of the things that we now do, and we've been doing this for the last 6 months, is we send out a survey once we reject a candidate or hire them. And the key areas that we look at is the interviewer experience, their experience with our recruiters, and any suggestions on improving. And we never see it as bad feedback, right? It's always constructive, and we take it very seriously. So from June till November 2022, we sent out 127 surveys. Sorry, we received 127 surveys, of which 87% were satisfactory, right? So it means we're doing a good job. So they were on the 4s and 5s. So if we look at the best feedback examples, it's saying we did a good job. They're impressed with how quickly we moved. If we look at constructive, well, some of the things that we went over that we've been teaching the talent acquisition partners, some of the things that we've been teaching our teams, those again were things that hadn't been done. So it was great because I think my team especially take a lot of the constructive feedback and they constantly look over it so that they're constantly doing a better job. So this is the fun part, right? This is the data that I want to share because it's very exciting. So I know Matt talked about emails, but if we think about our audience and we think about who resonates, who looks at their emails, who looks at their text messages, 5 touch points is what I try and push our recruiters to do. 5 touch points. So think LinkedIn message, email, text, and call. Those, and if you think about it, 63% of recruiters say there is a talent shortage, right? If we think about it, if there's a talent shortage, obviously the candidates that you've sourced, the pipeline that you have, you need to constantly reach out to that pipeline. It's not going to happen by sending one email. It's not going to happen by adding them on LinkedIn once. You have to constantly reach out to them. Just like your sales team has to constantly reach out to their, when they BD, right? So think of it in the same way. Take that same sales approach. And this is where automated emails have been amazing for us as well. And we've used Fetcher. And I'll show you the numbers here. So if we look at the total opportunities that were there and the emails sent, on average, that was 2.5 emails. When I spoke to the Fetcher team, it takes anywhere between 2 to 3 emails before a candidate reaches back out to you. Of those emails, 69 were opened. Of those, 38% replied. Now, if we think about it, go all the way down, 11 people were hired from just our sequential emailing. Now, what does that mean? Look at that number, 272 people hired this year, right? 86 were sourced. 11 of those came from those automated emails. So I know it's not a huge number, but that's still a fraction of something that we had to put in to get those candidates to come on board with us. And if we look at it this way, right, email is ranked the most used, 51%, and the most effective, 39% channel to reach candidates. 38% replies. I mean, that's pretty huge. Those numbers aren't lying. This is real data from our ATS. And 80% of those emails came from Fetcher. So thank you, guys. So, in a nutshell, it doesn't stop. Once you have a process, you have to continuously look at how you improve that process, right? You constantly have to go back. What did I do? How can we do it again? Especially if your company is ever evolving. So here's some of the key things that I always tell people. Research and benchmark. Don't reinvent the wheel, right? There's other people that are spending a lot of money. Use their information. Technology. Always look out for technology. There's always cool stuff that's out there. And actually, if they're in beta testing or if they're a small company, like Fetcher was when we brought them on, you can actually help improve the tech and work with them throughout the years. Collaborate with other departments. Don't do it all alone, right? Get marketing to give you stuff. Get sales to give you stuff. Actually, have your team sit down with sales leaders and get them to teach them how to sell candidates. Because if you do that, guess what? When it comes to negotiation stage, like think about end of last year, beginning of this year, right? I had to teach my team how to negotiate. I had to get the sales leaders in to help us because all of a sudden everyone's asking for 20% more of what they were making. So that's, again, using your sales teams to help you with that. Learn your company, understand the business, understand the marketplace, all right? Become a real consultant. And obviously industry knowledge. What are the things that are happening? What are the articles that your sales team and marketing are reading? What are the articles that engineering is reading? Understand all of that. And I guess that's it.